Hello, my name is Mosmin, and today I will present an analysis of learning episode using three main theories: the behavioral perspective, the cognitive perspective, and the socio-cultural perspective. And my learning episode comes from year 4 classroom, where students were learning addition with regrouping. So let's start my introduction and my overview theories, which basically tells that learning theory helps us understand how students acquire knowledge and skill. They also guide teachers in planning effective lesson. In my episode, students were struggling with regrouping, but through teachers' guidance, peer support, and patience, they improved. I will explain this episode through three lenses: behavior, cognitive, and socio-cultural theory. In the overview of my learning, which tells behavioral pays attention to observable learning and reinforcement, and cognitive pay attention to mental functions such as memory and problem solving. And socio-cultural emphasize communication, support, and cultural background. So the first is behavioral perspective, which basically tells behavioral perspective focus on observable change in behavior. Psychologists like Weston, Skinner, and Pavla explain how learning happens through conditioning with his dog experiment. Weston showed fear conditioning with little Albert, and Skinner explained operant conditioning with reinforcement. In my class, I praise students when they got correct answer. This positive reinforcement encourages them to keep trying and improve their performance. I have a diagram here as an example which shows that Skinner operant conditioning box. The rat over here presses the lever here and get food as a reward. So the behavior is repeated. Simply, in the classroom, when students receive praises or reward for correct answer, they got motivated to repeat the behavior and correct answer. This shows how positive reinforcement helps learning. Second perspective is cognitive. These are the bullet points which tells that cognitive perspective sees learning as an active mental process. Piggott and Berner contribute a lot here. These two contribute a lot here. Piggott explained how children construct knowledge through stages of development, and Berner highlighted discovery learning. Cognitive compare the mind to a computer. Information is received, process and stores. In my episode, students first use their working memory to follow the regrouping steps, right? With practice, they transfer this process into long-term memory and could solve problems more confidently. Here, the picture here is an example which explains what I was explaining. So the diagram here is an example which represent cognitive theory of learning, which views the mind like a computer, as we can see, information enters through the sense. It process in short-term memory and then stored in long-term memory. In my classroom, students first struggle with regrouping, but with practice and guidance, they process the step mentally and stored the strategy for future use. This shows how cognitive processes are central to learning. And the third perspective is socio-cultural perspective, which basically means that socio-cultural perspective comes from Viscott's theory, right? He believes learning happens through interaction with others and through cultural tools like language. The key idea here is zone of proximal development, or ZPD, right? This is the gap between what student can do alone and what they can do with the help. Teacher and peer provide scaffolding to move students through in this zone. In my lesson, student could not solve regrouping problem alone, but when I guided them step by step and encouraged them to walk in pairs, they succeed. This shows learning with ZPD with scaffolding, right? And here is the diagram which explains the diagram shows Viscott's zone of proximal development, ZPD, and scaffolding structure of the center. The center is what student can do alone, right? The middle ring is what they can do with help, and the outer ring is beyond their current ability. In my episode, students solve problems successfully when I gave hint or when they work in pairs, right? This scaffolding helps them move from what they couldn't do alone to what they could achieve with support, right? And by slide 7 till 11 is basically the comparison of perspective, right? Slide 7, episode of learning for year 4. The subject was regrouping, and the challenges was adding up the numbers, and the teacher used strategy, feedback and repetition, place value block, peer discussion in pair, which helped them understand better. Result: the majority of students increase their accuracy, they learn, right? So the first viewpoint, the first analysis is behavioral perspective. Behavior has been developed by patience and repetition. Positive reinforcement is a result of praise. Students use feedback to fix their mistake. Explain a noticeable shift in behavior, which will enhance accuracy. And the second perspective analysis is cognitive. Pupil cognitively process place value. Blocks use used to enhance understanding. Schemas that have been changed with new information. Students use metacognition to clarify their justification. Explains to student how regrouping works. And slide 10 is social cultural perspective analysis. A greater knowledgeable person is a teacher. CPT, acquiring knowledge beyond self-reliance, right? Which is a facilitated achievement. And third point, scaffolding. Over time, the teacher provides less assistance. And the fourth point, learning was improved by peer collaboration, right? When they come in groups, when they come in pairs, they help each other. That's when they learn better. Explain why communication was essential to advance. Sorry. In my 11th slide is comparing theory, which basically with all the which till 7 to 11, which basically means each theory explains learning differently. Behavioral highlight reinforcement and reward. Cognitive focus on mental process like memory and problem solving. Social culture explains theory, emphasize interaction and scaffolding. Together, this perspective gives a more complete picture of my learning episode, while behavioralism explain motivation, cognitivism explain processing, and socio-cultural theory explain the role of support from each others. So what basically says till 7 to 11 I have already said, which comparing the perspective, right? Behavioral description and reinforcement, as I said. Cognitive describes schemas and mental process, as I said. And social culture describes communication and support and cooperation, as I have said. And my conclusion, the 12 is my conclusion, and 13th slide is my reference. These are the reference I used to do my script and my episode to prepare my PowerPoint. So my conclusion, to conclude, learning is complex process. My year 4 episode shows that students need reinforcement, mental strategy and social support to succeed. Applying learning theory helps teachers understand student needs and design better lesson. This reflection helped me see the value of combining behavioralist, cognitive and socio-cultural perspective to support learning in the classroom. That was all that I wanted to discuss in my PowerPoint presentation, and thank you.